Well, hello everyone. I just wanted to do another one of these wee videos of something that I'd come across in my just personal study this week. But also, I'm aware that I sent a few of these last week, so there was a bit of had a break for a few days. You got a break from seeing my face and the same background for a few days. But I just wanted to send another one here. These videos I think serve a couple of purposes. One of which is to make sure that I actually change my clothes fairly regularly. I'm very conscious that I at least need to change my jumper in these videos so that it's not the same. I don't get caught out wearing the same things all the time in these unusual times of lockdown. But I also wanted to just, if I can, send something that might be an encouragement to people or just even interesting to people from the Bible. And one of these passages that I came across, I mentioned the book of Acts last week, and Acts chapter 12, I think I mentioned last week, but this week I noticed in Acts 14, just reading that, which I might share more from Acts 14 come Thursday, but something that came in a passage there, Acts 14, where I believe Paul and Barnabas have been sent out in order to spread the gospel and preach the gospel to different people at different places. And Paul and Barnabas come to Iconium in chapter 14. So chapter 14, verse 1. I just wanted to read the first 7 verses and show you something that kind of surprised me, I would say, from this passage, something that might, to our human minds, is a little unexpected. I don't think we would expect to see that there in the passage. But Acts chapter 14, it says, "Now at Iconium they entered together into the Jewish synagogue and spoke in such a way that a great number of both Jews and Greeks believed. But the unbelieving Jews stirred up the Gentiles and poisoned their minds against the brothers. So they remained for a long time speaking boldly for the Lord, who bore witness to the word of his grace, granting signs and wonders to be done by their hands. But the people of the city were divided. Some sided with the Jews and some with the apostles. When an attempt was made by both Gentiles and Jews with their rulers to mistreat them and to stone them, they learned of it and fled to Lystra and I want to say Derbe, but it's Derbe, not like Derby in England, but anyway, Derby, whatever, cities of Lycaonia and to the surrounding country, and there they continued to preach the gospel." And I mentioned just a moment ago that there was something in here that really, I would say, surprised me in a way. And it was in verse 14 when we're told that the unbelieving, verse 2, but the unbelieving Jews stirred up the Gentiles and poisoned their minds against the brothers. But then verse 3, there's an interesting little phrase there. It says, "So they remained for a long time, speaking boldly for the Lord, who bore witness to the word of his grace, granting signs and wonders to be done by their hands." And it's the fact that it says that these people came and they stirred up opposition in verse 2. And then in verse 3 it says, "So they," and what we might expect to read there, and what we might expect to see is, "So they went somewhere else to preach the gospel," or "So they fled, so they ran away, so they piped down a little bit and were just a little bit quieter." It doesn't say that though, does it? "Stirred their minds against the brothers." It says, "So they remained for a long time, speaking boldly for the Lord." And so there was something in them that when they received this opposition, when people were opposing their message, when people were turning people against Paul and against Barnabas when they didn't like their message, there would have been a temptation to go somewhere else. There would have been a temptation to go into another city where they might be better received. But that actually, in light of that, that encourages them, that makes them feel that they need to stay longer. So they remained for a long time because they're saying people are turning them against them, maybe teaching them false things, trying to lead them away from the faith, these people that they've spoken to. And so these people that have believed, these people that they've spoken to, and so they see the need, rather than to run away from the situation or to back off or to shrink away, instead they remain, they commit to staying and to helping these believers because they care for the sheep, they care about they care about discipleship, they care about people not being led astray by false teaching and false doctrine. They care about these believers, and so they stay longer in spite of opposition. And it says they remained for a long time, so they committed to staying for a long time. And also they committed to speaking boldly for the Lord. They spoke boldly. They didn't kind of shrink back. They continued to preach the way they'd been preaching before, despite the opposition that they were now facing in this situation. And the result of it is wonderful, that the Lord bore witness. So he proved, he bore witness to the word of his grace, granting signs and wonders to be done by their hands. And so the result of them staying, the result of them committing, the result of them continuing to preach boldly despite opposition, was that the Lord powerfully worked through them by his Spirit. And I believe brought more people to the faith and did these signs and wonders through them as well, did these miracles through them. And just makes me wonder, what would they have missed out on if they just moved on straight away to the next place. And later on in the passage, they obviously hear that they're going to be killed, that they're going to be stoned and mistreated. So they obviously decide that there is a point where it's right to move on, and it's now time to move on. And they've probably, by staying, have helped those people be built up in the faith, grow in the faith, and be better equipped to deal with what's going to come their way, better equipped to rebuke false teaching, better equipped to deal with persecution and trial and difficulty. And so at that point, I guess they can, when they hear that they're going to be killed if they don't move on, that's when they move on to the next place. And in verse 7 it says, and there they continued to preach the gospel. So though they move on to another place, the preaching of the gospel doesn't stop. The proclamation of the word continues wherever they go. That was just something that really jumped out at me when I was reading it. You sometimes find that when you're studying the Bible. You read things that surprise you. You read things that you don't expect, and from that are really countercultural, even for us, and counterintuitive. They faced opposition. They faced people turning these believers against them, and their response was to stay. Their response was to stay and boldly preach the gospel, despite this opposition. And it's just their Christ-like way of thinking, the opposite way of the world. And so they stay and they build up these believers. But that was just something that really encouraged me. That, and in spite of all that persecution, that the Lord did miraculous and wonderful things and brought more people into the kingdom of God and better equipped that church for the time when Paul and Barnabas and others would have to move on. And so that was just something that I find really encouraging and really quite interesting and challenging to me. You know, how do I respond if we begin to face opposition, if we begin to face difficulty? How are we going to respond to that? Are we going to boldly are we going to boldly proclaim the gospel? Or are we going to shrink back and decide there's an easier path? And so that's just something that's been on my mind, and I hope that's helpful or encouraging or challenging to you today. But I hope everyone's doing well, and if I don't send another one of these before Thursday, you'll all see my face on Thursday, and I'll get to see yours, and we'll actually get to talk with one another in real time, so that'll be nice. But I hope everyone is doing fine, keeping safe, and again, if anything's required, please let us know.